G'day girls, boys, children of all ages, how are we doing? It's Dan here again for Pommyinoz and we're looking at the weekend's fixtures of the AFL. We've just got over the Bore Fest, that was Richmond versus Collingwood, and we're itching to see tonight's game, Hawthorn versus Geelong. Should be a ripper, let's hope so. But football, we've waited for so long, and a bit like 2020, it kind of disappointed. So let's hope these weekend games are a lot more exciting and a bit more exhilarating for the neutral to watch. If you are new around here, please drop a like, subscribe to the channel and turn the notification bell on. It really does help the channel and it gives me a reason to get up in the morning. First off, Saturday we're going to the Gabba at 1:45, ball up. And it's Brisbane versus Fremantle. Should be a really good game, this one, and I'm really excited about having a look and watching Brisbane. Brisbane are a team that I really enjoy watching. If we have a look at the head-to-head matchups, you can see here the algorithm I use, TPI, is giving them an 83 out of 100 strength rating for this 22 that's gone into this game, with the defence being 82 versus Fremantle's forward line of an 80. The midfield and follower line 86 to 82 in Brisbane's favour, and the forward versus defence 83 for Brisbane, 78 for Fremantle. And this is going to be where I think the game is won and lost. It's the power of the forward lines. Can the forward lines tick? We know Hitwood and McStay at Brisbane, that they're either hot and cold, and then we look at Fremantle and a lot's going to rely on Taberner and Lobb up top to really get the impetus and kick goals. It's a very strong backline at Brisbane, and it's very, 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 very hard midfield to break. We're looking at the key players that have been identified. And for Brisbane, obviously, we're looking at Harris Andrews to have a good game, Eric Hitwood, Hugh McCluggage, and obviously Lachie Neale. These guys have got either strength in their matchups according to the system, or they're going to have good games. And on Fremantle's case, we've got Luke Ryan, Reece Conker, Nat Fyfe, and Matt Taberner to have a look at. A lot's going to rely heavily on Matt Taberner and Conker and Fyfe getting the ball into him in good positions to really kickstart their attack. When we look at this game, when it's been played using our software 1,000 times, it's coming out that Brisbane have a 75% chance of winning this game to 25, with a projected score of 62 playing 46. So Brisbane should run out here, and I'm going to stick with the system here. I really do think Brisbane will get the job done, and I think it'll be quite convincing in the end. It's a very tough game though, and anything can happen with these shortened quarters. But I think when you look at all the other numbers, average points for both sides, 85 to Brisbane, 62 to Fremantle. Average points conceded, 84 for Fremantle versus 75, with an average winning margin for 33 for Brisbane. I really do feel Brisbane are going to get the job done here. Put that round one disaster behind them and get the job done. Next game is at 4:35 at Marvel Stadium on Saturday. My beloved Blue Baggers take on Melbourne Demons. And it's going to be a really, really interesting game. I've just heard recently, just as I'm recording this, that Jesus is out. And it seems like Darcy Lang will replace him. It doesn't really change too much in the system, according to the data. So, I mean, it's still a like for like. But it's going to be a tough game. And when we look at Carlton versus Melbourne, they're very similar from a statistical basis. So in the last 10 games, Carlton have averaged 77 points, where Melbourne have averaged 7. Against its 85 plays 90 to Carlton. Average winning margin, Carlton have got the head on that as well, 14 to 5. And they both kick around average 60 points. The last 10 games as well at the Marvel, there's a lot being made about Melbourne's ability at the Marvel, but they do have a 60% winning streak at the moment at Marvel, as opposed to Carlton. And I think that is kind of an indicator there that Carlton traditionally don't kick very well. If we look at both of the teams though, when they go neck to neck, Melbourne have actually got an 84 strength team rating. A lot of players have come in here. There's a lot of conjecture as well with the system that we use, because it's obviously trying to estimate how Jackson and Rivers will go. But it's a very strong team, and people forget that. This side, as a 22, is super, super strong and really reliant. If we look at the defence versus forward, it's 84 in favour of Melbourne versus 7. Midfield versus midfield and followers, 86 to Melbourne. A lot of that is from Hawthorn as well. You've got to remember that. Versus 82 to Carlton. And 81 in the forward line versus 83 in defence. Carlton's defence does have the win there. When we're looking at key players and how this game's going to be dictated to, identifying Max Gawn, obviously he's going to be a huge influence on this game. Petrarca as well. Is he going to be hot? Is he going to be cold? Clayton Oliver, as we know, no doubt about his class. It's definitely going to be the battle of their midfield, because you can see that Carlton as well have got Cripps. Who feeds off Gawn's first use better? Who sharks? How much does Pitternet win? There's a lot to play out in that. And obviously Jack Viney, kind of unheralded. It's interesting because TPI as well, when it was looking at these rhythms, actually thought Ed Kerner was going to be a huge matchup for Carlton. Sam Docherty is no surprise to me, because we know it's a metres gained league. He's very efficient at doing that. Ed Kerner as well, I think for me, is one of the best taggers in the game, just behind Matt De Boer in recent years. And Jacob Wheater, he's going to have a lot of work to do. If he can stop McDonald, who has a traditional, very good record against Carlton, it's going to be an interesting one. The team overall rating is 84 to 81 in Melbourne's favour. And it's going to be a tough game. So when TPI did this and we had a look at the matchups and we did the simulation 1,000 times, it actually said that Melbourne will win this fixture 54 times versus 46% for Carlton. It's a real tight game, with the projected scores being 64 to 60 in Melbourne's favour. I think it is going to be a tight game, and I think it will be close. For me, I am a Carlton fan and I've got to back Carlton in here, and I think they'll win. I'm going to go against TPI. It could totally ruin my tipping in this series, but screw it, it's my show. But I mean, I will say this, I think this is going to be a very important game for both of these sides. Both sides have to make a statement. Both sides have got to put the disappointment in round one behind them, and particularly Melbourne, they've got that 2018 high, 2019 low. Carlton are kind of the opposite, 2018 low, 2019 high. It's a very make or break game, this, I think, already early in the season, because both sides have got winnable games in the next four as well, against some tough opposition as well, where you'd expect them to lose. This is the one game that you probably penciled in a win, and it really could kickstart both seasons. So I think it's going to be really tough. I hope to see Carlton up to the challenge, up for a scrap, and really up to make this game a tough contest, but I think it should be a ripper. Then we go to Metricon at 7:40 on the Saturday evening, and it's Gold Coast versus West Coast. Now, we don't really need a complex analytical system to tip this one, but let's go into it anyway, because I like Gold Coast, and I might be controversial there, but I've got a lot of time for the Suns. So if we have a look at it, defence for Suns is 77 going up against 83 of West Coast. 81 of their midfield and followers is going up against a rating of 88 for the West Coast, one of the best midfields in the comp. Forward line 75 for Gold Coast, and they've got a stiff task again, 88 for the back line at the Eagles. Works out that this is an 86 rated 22 going up against a 78. And that is literally saying to us that this game should be more one-sided than your weekend team playing the under sixes. It should be literally one-sided. And if we look at the numbers, we can see why. The average points scored in the last 10 games is 57 for Gold Coast versus 89 for West Coast. Average points against 120, just under 120 for Gold Coast versus 78 for West Coast. Very stringent backline with an average margin of a win 30 for West Coast and obviously nothing for Gold Coast. If we look at the win percentage, it's a 10% win percentage at the Metricon over the last 10 versus 33.3% recurring for West Coast. So obviously the stats are saying it's all them. And when you look at the little small stats, it's things like 60% goal accuracy versus 50. How often a team loses at half time? It's every time for Gold Coast versus 25 for West Coast. Everything points in their favour. If we look at the key matchups, you can see why as well. These are what TPI is saying, who are going to have a good game or be an influence in the contest to dictate a win. You've got the cautious Harbrow, Matt Rowell and Witts. And I always worry when we look at the system and it picks a new kid. And what Rowell and Locosius, first-year player and a second-year player, a lot relying on their shoulders, as particularly Locosius going up against players like Ryan, Darling, things like that. It's going to be tough. It can be done though. We've seen it before, but it's 95% win predictability to the Eagles. And you can see why when you look at the key players identified in this fixture. Tim Kelly, Shannon Hearn, Jack Darling, Luke Shuey. These guys are who's who of football talent. When we look at the projected score, it's 79 to West Coast to 38 for Gold Coast. Should be an easy tip, this one. I should definitely have one in the bank for the weekend. I'm going with West Coast. And finally, we've got probably the game I'm most looking forward to. I do love watching derbies, or the showdowns, or whatever we call them nowadays. And that is Port Adelaide versus Adelaide at the AO at 7:40 Saturday evening. And it should be a rip snorter. If we look at the two teams, you can see they're neck and neck. Both teams with an 82 out of 100 potential rating. And it is an absolute barnstormer, this one. When we looked at this and we analysed it and I went through the numbers and crunched the numbers, this was an exciting tie. 82 of the back line for Adelaide is their rating versus 81 of the forward line, neck and neck. Midfield versus, and the followers, 84 for Adelaide, 83 for Port. And the forward line, 79 to Adelaide, 83. There's the one swing there. And we look at the key players identified, you can see why it's picked them. Tex Walker's going to have a big game. He needs to up that forward line now. Rory Laird, Matt Crouch and Riley O'Brien are going to have to really combine. And then you look at where Port are going to win it. Robbie Gray, Connor Rosie, Darcy Byrne-Jones. For me, one of the most underrated halfbacks in the game. And Scott Lycett. It's going to be a really intriguing tie. And when we look at the stats, you can see why this is going to be a tight fixture. You've got 95 points for Port Adelaide versus 76 points for Adelaide in the last 10 games scored. Average points against, 93 for Adelaide, 73 for Port Adelaide. And you can see there that it is, where it comes down to it, it's a 60% to a 20% swing for both sides. It's going to be a really tough game for both sides because Adelaide have won 3 of the last 5 versus their cousins, Port Adelaide. So it's going to be a really intriguing tie. I think it's going to be a really exciting tie. And it's not going to be as easy as the first round that Port had when they won 76 versus 29 to Gold Coast. For me, when we look at the numbers, TPI says that this is going to be a very tight game. It's got 62 to Port versus 50 to Adelaide. And it's, even though the winning margin is quite high, it said that Port a 59% chance of winning this versus 41%. So it's not all foregone and ended. I'm going to predict in this one though, so I'm going to go against the grain. I feel that even though TPI says Port, I think Adelaide, just for some reason, going to get up. I really think Tex is going to have a good game. I think he's talked a lot, and I'm going to be looking at these players. And when I see players like Matt Crouch and Riley O'Brien, I really do feel like the stats are trying to tell us something that's not so obvious. And I think that for me, I'm just going to back Adelaide. I know the system has said Port, but for me, for my tip, I'm going to do Adelaide. Thanks very much for watching, guys. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. I'll be back on Saturday evening to do the Sunday fixtures. I'm really looking forward to this weekend of footy. It's back. It's super exciting. Tell me who you guys think you're going to win this weekend. Who are you tipping? Super love hearing from you all. We have got a TPI video explained next week as well. A few of you have asked it. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great weekend. Pom out.